What up, Dungeon Squad? Today I'm beyond excited. We're going to be going over our third installment of our beginners boxing series. In the first two videos, we went over the stance and your footwork while maintaining your boxing stance. In this video, we're going to go over head movement while maintaining your boxing stance. So stick around, you don't want to miss out. Now, if you haven't had an opportunity to watch the first two videos, I definitely encourage you to watch those two before you get into this video here. In that first video, we talk about the proper boxing stance. In the second video, we talk about footwork while maintaining your boxing stance. So I'm not going to go too much into the stance nor the footwork in this video. So if you haven't watched those, please go check those out first before you get into this one here. So I got three moves that I'm going to try to explain today as we get into the head movement. It's a slip, dip in, and dip out. And here's what it looks like when it's all said and done. Slip, dip in, dip out. So let's go ahead and get into this first move. So to give us a point of reference here, we want to simulate that our opponent is throwing a jab at us, okay, for this first move. Now, rule of thumb is you always want to go to the outside of the punch when moving your head. Reason being is if my opponent is throwing a jab at me and it's coming straight for my head, if I go to the inside of that punch, what I'm doing here is I'm leaving myself open for my opponent's big right hand. So we want to go to the outside of that jab. And the way to properly do the slip here is you want to make sure that when you're putting down your head, when you're moving your head, that it's going to the inside of your guard, okay? You don't want to be going all the way out here or bending your back, because if your opponent throws a big right hand or overhand right, you're out of balance, you're out of your boxing stance, you're going to fall over. So we want to make sure that our head is going to the inside of our boxing stance, and we want to slightly dip our knees. So we want to drop our knees to get out of the way of that jab. And here's what that looks like. I'm going to slip my head in, drop my rear knee. Just like that. It's not a very complicated move, very subtle. And keep in mind that your opponent's hand is as big as your fist, okay? So you don't need to go much more than the size of that fist. So you don't need to be all the way down here when your opponent's hand is just this size here. So you want to slip just enough so that punch goes over your head, giving you the opportunity to come back with a counter shot. So I'm going to slip in. That punch is going to go right over my head, and that's going to allow me to come back with the straight cross, or if I want to come back with the big right uppercut. So that'll be difficult to do if you're spending all your time down here slipping those jabs. So just enough for that jab to fly over your head. So the second move we're going to get into is what I like to call the dip in. Now, just so we have a visual of what's going on here, let's say your opponent is going to throw a 1-2 at you. So that's a jab followed by a straight cross. Now, you want to make sure you're getting out of the way of both those punches to allow you to land some counter shots or just to avoid getting hit in the face. So the first move we have is the slip. We remember how to do that. We're going to drop our knees, slip. So now that I've slipped that jab, that right hand's going to come at me. And if I stay in this position here, I'm leaving myself open. So what I want to do from here is I want to step toward my opponent, and while I step, I'm going to dip my head to avoid the big right hand. So let's put that together. So it's a slip, dip in. One more time. Slip, dip in. Now, a couple things to keep in mind here, and some of the mistakes that I see from some of my beginner boxers is when you're doing that dip in, you want to make sure that you're going straight towards your opponent. You don't want to step to the side, because if you do that, then you're out of balance and you leave yourself very square and open to getting hit. So if you're gonna avoid that right hand and you step to the outside, here's what it looks. Yeah, you didn't get hit with that big right hand, but if he comes back with the left hook or he recoils and comes back with the right hand again, you're not in your boxing stance, you're going to get hit, you're going to fall over. All right? So another thing is As soon as you initiate that step to go towards your opponent, your head needs to automatically be moving just like the letter U. This is the way I teach my fighters here. Just like the letter U, you want it to be fluid, you want it to be smooth, all right? You don't want to step in and then try to drop the head, because then what happens there is you step into that big right hand, boom, okay? So remember, as soon as you step in, you begin initiating the dip with your head, and you want your head to look like the letter U, just like that. So we're gonna slip, dip in. One more time. Slip, dip in. And the last move we're gonna get into is the dip out. So now it's the same thing as dipping in, just in reverse. So once you get in there, you wanna make sure you have an exit strategy or an exit plan. You don't ever wanna just walk out. So once you get in, slip, dip in, you don't wanna just walk out, because if he's still throwing punches at you, you're leaving yourself open to those big shots. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna slip, we're gonna dip in, then we're gonna dip out. So let's visualize that our opponent is throwing a 1, 2, 3 combination. So a jab, straight right, left hook. Here's how we avoid getting hit by all 3 of those punches. We're gonna slip in, we're gonna dip in, dip out. Slip, dip in. Now I'm gonna go out, same thing. I'm gonna initiate, I'm gonna step first with my back foot. As soon as I initiate that step, my head is doing like the letter U, backwards. I'm going back. Dip out. One more time. Slip, dip in, dip out. Now I've avoided here getting hit by all 3 of those shots, which is exactly what we want to happen. Slip, dip in. You don't want to stay in here, especially if you're not throwing punches, or if you are throwing punches and your opponent happens to throw that big left hook, you're leaving yourself open. So you got to get out of there. Dip out. So just like in some of my other videos, I encourage you guys to put down that strip of tape. That way it gives you kind of a guideline and allows you to see whether you're going straight towards your opponent and straight out. You don't want to be stepping to the side for this purpose. You don't want to be stepping to the side where you're leaving yourself open and you begin to develop a habit of landing square up. Now later on, we'll get into some more advanced head movement and footwork, which will allow you to step to the side and pivot and do all that stuff. But just for the beginning, starting purposes, you want to make sure you're slipping in, going straight towards your opponent while you dip, and coming straight out while you dip out. So hands are up, hands are tight. Remember, we want to go to the outside of the punch. So we're going to slip in, and dip out. And notice how I stay in a straight line here. I go straight towards my opponent, and I come right back out. Slip, dip in, dip out. And that's really it, Dungeon Squad. I encourage you guys, don't overcomplicate it. Keep it very basic when you're practicing these 3 moves. You don't want to overcomplicate and start thinking about all this extra stuff. First, master these basics, and then you can go start getting into the fancy stuff, the fancy footwork, head movement, and all that stuff. And just like in all my other videos, if you guys have any tips or pointers, please drop that down in the comment box. I get back to everybody because I truly do value your time and your knowledge. Now, I encourage you to stick around a little bit here. I'm going to demonstrate a drill that we like to do here at Dungeon Boxing Club that allows our fighters to practice these very principles that we just talked about. Thank you once again, Dungeon Squad, and we'll catch you guys next time.